Hello, mamas, and welcome back to the Pregnancy with Physio Laura podcast. Today we have our bonus episode in the Newborn Life series with the wonderful Jen Butler. In this episode, Jen shares her thoughts on dummies, the ideal baby sleep environment, swaddling, sleep suits, and she also demonstrates her famous swaddling technique. Enjoy! Let's talk dummies. So, I personally have used dummies with both my children, and one self-weaned off the dummy and decided to start sucking his fingers instead, which, look, it's not a problem yet, but I'm sure I'm going to wish I had a dummy in about 5 years' time. And the other one, I, under your wonderful advice, weaned off her dummy at 6 months because I felt like it was no longer helping us. But I want you to talk me through how are dummies effective, and if they're working well for families, should they keep going with them? Should they stop them at a certain time? What's the down low on the dummy sitch?
Dummies are a wonderful settling tool, undoubtedly, because I mentioned that, newborn babies love to suck. So there's lots of things that we need to think about with the dummy. So first of all, if you can try and not use a dummy in, say, the first 4 weeks, that can be good for breastfeeding. So from that sort of perspective, it's good to mention that. I used a dummy with Max from birth and he was fine. I did put it off with Ted till about 4 weeks and then I definitely offered him one. I am a huge fan of dummies in the 4th trimester. It's one of the 5 S's, suck in, utilize it. It's the best thing that you can do. The thing then that becomes, I guess, an issue with dummies is it can become a parent-dependent association because a young baby doesn't have the fine motor skills to be able to replace that themselves. And so this is where sometimes it can impact sleep. So if you've got a baby that's, say, sucking to sleep, and they might drop their dummy, and a parent will often say to me, but they suck it and then they drop it, they don't need it. But by the time they've sucked and dropped it, job's done. They've sucked themselves off to sleep. And then while they're going through a sleep cycle, what can then happen is that when they get to the top of their sleep cycle, they're in that lighter phase, they don't have that dummy to suck, that can lead for them to wake up. So my advice at the end of the day is if you love the dummy, keep it and roll with it. If you're going to get rid of the dummy, my advice is to get rid of it by 6 months, or be prepared to strap yourself in to have it until they're around sort of 2.5. Now, I've had people say that they've gotten rid of it in between these ages, but the reason why I say before 6 months is because your baby's yet to have developed a developmental milestone called object permanence. So if the dummy isn't in their sight, they kind of don't know it exists. So they're not super attached to it. Basically, once your baby has object permanence, they become attached to things. And that's when comforters can be useful too, as they start to actually get attached to it. And so if you take it away before they are 6 months, then they're not attached to it. Whereas if you then keep it until they're old enough to understand that the dummy is going, then that's when we can then explain to our toddlers by then that the dummy has to, in our case, the dummy got thrown out into the garbage truck. And so now every time the garbage truck goes past, the boys are like, is my dummy in there? So you can get rid of it in between, but the best time I think from an attachment point of view is once you've committed to it, to allow them to be able to understand the concept of the dummy going bye-bye sort of thing. And just as a side note, both my boys had dummies and I had them until they were 2.5, and that's when we then got rid of them. Now, if I was to have a third baby, I think I'd probably try and get rid of it myself by 6 months. That would be my goal next time, because by then the suck reflex isn't as strong. So theoretically, they can find other ways to settle themselves by then.
Yes. The reason you would want to do it differently with your third, is it just because of the hassle of having to have the dummy for 2 years and not forgetting it, not leaving it behind?
Yeah.
Why would you change?
Max actually had chronic ear infections, which I'm sure was perpetuated by the dummy. Ted never did. So this is the difference between children. I found the dummy a bit of a hindrance, a massive hindrance with Max actually, because I know that Max's sleep would have been better had he not been so reliant on the dummy, because between the ages of 3 and probably 7 to 8 months, when he was finally able to find that dummy himself and replace it, it was into like ultimately it was interrupting sleep. So me and my husband had to be the one to replace it. So it's a parent dependent association until they can replace it themselves. So they're not truly self-settling if they're settling with a dummy. So with Ted, he could replace it by 6 months. So it was not really an issue with Ted. But I guess like neither of the boys were really truly able to self-settle until they were without the dummy, because it was actually a thing that was helping them to settle. But like that worked for us. And at the end of the day, it's what works for you. And, you know, in retrospect, it didn't actually really work with Max. But back then I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my options were, you know. And so back then I wish I'd probably got advice 5 years ago though. From me. I didn't know what I knew when I had Max. It was actually what ignited the fire in me, as I was like, I need to know more. Like, so here we are 5 years later.
I think what you said just sums it all up again. Like, it's so personal. It has to work for you. I was all about the dummy with Pia, more than happy to have the dummy. I thought it was a better option than finger sucking, which is what Mussy does, because I thought we can take it away easier. But I got to a point where I was like, no, I don't think it is working. And it's okay to pivot and change. And just because you said you were going to do one thing doesn't mean you have to continue with that. So I think it's constant pivoting. It's constant reassessment with motherhood. And there is no right way. So
that's right.
Thank you, Jen, for wrapping that all up. And pun completely intended. Let's talk about wrapping. So... So a lot of Posse members were asking about swaddling, and I know that swaddling is a bit of a minefield. So what we can acknowledge, which is what you said earlier, is that swaddling is really important in the fourth trimester, because it helps baby feel tucked in, helps baby feel safe, and it stops that startle reflex, which can often wake them up. Now, when it comes to swaddling, there's pouches, there's sleep suits, there's wraps, there's different methods, there's different techniques. So what's your take, first of all, on you're going to show us how you demonstrate a wrap swaddle, which we will do at the end. But what's your take on, should parents start with a wrap and start swaddling that way? Should they start with a sleep suit? Where do they start?
Great question. I think that in the very early days, a baby needs to be swaddled, because not even a sleeping bag will contain them enough to really contain them. Like, we want them they were so squishy in your tummy, so the more closely wrapped they can be, the better. And then as you're like sort of coming out of that fourth trimester, the first 3 months, that's when they can sort of start to go into sleep suits. My favorite are and it's personal preference, guys, I will say that. I always love the Ergo pouch. It's a hands to heart, because your baby will have their hands contain a little Ergo cocoon they are. And so this is where they'll sit. And so they still can't startle themselves, but they're sort of here. And they can still bring their little fists up through the sleeping bag to try and suck. So that's my favourite. My little hack that I did with the boys prior to being able to go into an Ergo cocoon was I would actually get a nice cotton muslin wrap. I would swaddle them, and then I'd put them inside the Ergo cocoon. So they still had the benefit of like a good TOG rating sleeping bag to keep them warm, but they also were contained. So that was
I've heard that before.
Yeah, that was my little thing that I did, and like I worked a treat for both the boys. Yeah. But some people love to dream. Babies will naturally take this, hands up when they sleep. Yeah. It's trial and error. Like, I personally didn't like the love to dreams. I found that they still sort of startled themselves a little bit by waking, but some babies sleep beautifully in them. When I teach swaddling, I'm not about the military arms down. I'm about the hands to heart angel wrap, which is the wrap I'll demonstrate.
Well, no baby is in utero, arms down by their side.
Nor are they up like this.
Yes. They're always at their mouth. All my babies have been anyway.
They are very...
Makes total sense.
Yeah, and that's what they adopt in utero. So again, it's kind of like going with what... And no baby, every newborn baby is naturally flexed. No baby is straight like a soldier. So again, there'll be people who say, oh, but my baby loves to be like that. That's fine. Like, work with their natural flexion before you start to test otherwise, I guess. Yeah.
And from a hip point of view, it's really important for babies' hips to be flexed and not straight. From a hip dysplasia and hip formation point of view, that's actually a really strong recommendation. So when it comes to wraps, we will look at your demonstration, your amazing swaddle technique soon. A lot of questions came through again about temperature.
Yeah.
How do I know if my baby's too hot, too cold? Should I put an extra blanket on top of their wrap? So have you got, I know it's hard because each room is going to be a different temperature, each environment is going to be a bit different, but do you have any tips or advice on how to know, first of all, whether your baby is at the right temperature, and if they are, like how to know how many extra layers to put on them?
Yeah. Always go for core. Don't look at your baby's hands and feet, because even like right now, my hands are cold, but I'm at my core warm. So it's not a good idea to test temperature based on their face or their arm and all of those things. If in an ideal world, if you can keep your room sitting between like 20 and 22 degrees, that is going to mean that it's going to be much easier to dress your baby in. So like at the end of the day, I always recommend sleeping bags because they have a TOG rated system. And so you can confidently say that if my baby's in a 2.5 TOG sleeping bag, then the room temperature should be sitting around 22, for example. Obviously, yes, the rooms are going to fluctuate, but the colder the room, the more layers they should have on. So whether you layer sleeping bags or whether you go for the thicker sleeping bag and put on some blankets are hard because they're not TOG rated. So you could say to me, oh, Jen, I use 3 blankets. Well, are they 3 mink blankets where they're super, super thick? Are they wool blankets? Are they cotton? Like the thickness, yeah, it's hard to gauge whether that is going to be enough just by saying 3 blankets. It's easier for me. And when I talk to families, I talk about, all right, let's talk about how we can dress your baby for your room temperature in whatever sleeping bag's appropriate. So definitely go for the core. If you can, try and keep your room temperature between 20 to 22, if that's possible. If you were to do that, you'd be looking at having your baby in about a 3.5 TOG sleeping bag. And that's all they'd need if that room temperature was sitting at that. You wouldn't actually need blankets and stuff. So that's kind of an overview of like an ideal scenario.
Yes, and I think what's really enticing about the Ergo pouch, which this is not at all sponsored.
Yeah, I was going to say no affiliation
with them at all. I wish.
Yeah.
Is that they send you a thermometer and they have that guide. So that's what I've always found really helpful for my kids. I've dressed them in, this is post-swaddling stages I'm talking about, but I've always dressed them in the Ergo pouches because I can look at their thermometer and go, okay, according to that chart, they should be in this many layers with this TOG-rated sleep suit. And it's just put my mind at ease because I'm not a particularly anxious or stressed person, but when it comes to overnight temperatures, I was driving myself crazy because I was always so concerned that my child is going to be too hot or too cold and not quite right. Every time they woke up, I was second guessing whether they were waking because they were too hot or too cold. And so I really like how simple that system is. So I do vouch for them purely because of how easy it is to understand how to dress your baby for the right temperature. So I think that's really helpful. My 2.5-year-old is still in a sleep suit because he just doesn't lie still at nighttime, so he won't stay under a doona.
Exactly.
And I believe they go all the way up to 4, so there's quite a large range. Are your boys still in sleep suits?
Ted is. He's still in the cot, and we've got the next size up because the only reason we took Max out of one was because he was starting to nighttime toilet train, and it was too much to ask of him to have to unzip a sleeping bag to then do a wee. So that was the only reason why I took them out. I love sleeping bags that much.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, let's talk sleep environment. So this is another hot topic because people aren't sure. So some of the questions coming in, which I'll ask you to touch on, Jen, is we're talking about colour. Not colour of the room, how dark the room is. So if you have a pink wall, they'll think that.
Pink's soothing.
So there is psychology in colours.
Yeah,
I think green is actually meant to be quite soothing.
Yeah.
So some of the posse members were asking, should the room be pitch black at all times or just for nighttime? And during the day it should be a bit lighter. We'll start with there. What's your take on how dark the room should be?
I don't believe in pitch black rooms. I don't think that is necessary. In saying that, though, there's some really highly stimulated babies and toddlers where perhaps a pitch black room is exactly what they need. But that's not the general rule, I would say. I think I aim for about 70% darkness. Now, to gauge that, it's always a bit tricky because you're like, well, what does that look like? If 100% pitch black is you can't see your hand in front of your face, then 70% is you're going to be able to see it. Like, it is worthwhile darkening your room because that's just basic sleep hygiene. We sleep better when we're in a darkened environment. So it's no different for your babies and toddlers. The more they can see, the more stimulating that is for them and the more that they're likely to see sleep time as playtime and not a time to relax. So darkness is great for reducing stimulation and also acting as a sleep cue, but no, it doesn't have to be pitch black.
Okay, that's really great advice, I think, because it can be very hard to achieve a pitch black room during the day, especially if you have a very big window.
Exactly.
Because the blackout blinds don't necessarily cover that entire window, and I think it can really stress women out. I think from my point of view, my first son could have slept in anything. Pia, I think, is a bit more of a stimulated baby. As awful as this is about to sound, she sleeps in the wardrobe. So just let me talk this out before anyone calls DHS on me. It is a huge room and it's our walk-in robe, and we found that she was very stimulated and our room wasn't dark enough. So she's in the wardrobe now. I hate saying that out loud. It sounds so bad. But it's pitch black in there. There's no windows in there.
Yeah.
So she sleeps so much better in our wardrobe. And it was just a personal thing. My first son, no problems, but she was definitely a bit more stimulated. But again, much easier to just have a darker room than to try and create darkness in a very light room. I found that really difficult to try and do.
Yeah.
Let's talk white noise. What's your take on white noise?
White noise is a fabulous tool. Like I've had sometimes I work with people and they'll say, oh, I tried white noise, but it didn't work. I'm like, if you expect white noise to be the answer to your baby and toddler sleeping like impeccably, that's not what it's about. It's about just creating a continuous white noise, a continuous background noise that acts as a sleep cue. So again, this is all about sleep cues. So it helps your baby and toddler to anticipate sleep. And it helps block out noise. Like when the postie comes and drops off your online shopping and the dog starts barking and your baby's in a light phase of sleep, they're going to wake up. However, if white noise is there to have it a level about the sound of a running vacuum, just so people sort of understand that pitch.
Okay.
It's quite loud. But if your baby can be around a vacuum, they can be around continuous white noise without it being damaging. I think a lot of families worry about it being damaging for babies' ears. But it's a great tool to just be able to block out. It's a great sleep cue, acts as that background noise to prevent sudden wakings from sudden noises. And it's such an easy way of doing something continuously. My husband and I sleep with white noise on every night. It's a sleep cue for us because we got used to it with the boys. And like the boys don't even need it anymore. We just do it out of habit. Yeah. And so now the whole goddamn family sleeps with white noise on.
I'm laughing because I am with you there.
Yeah, I love my white noise. Sometimes I put it on before a nap and it helps me to relax. I sound like a little nana, don't I?
Oh, I'm there with you. Do you recommend it from day dot?
You don't have to introduce it from day dot. As I spoke about with rhythms and all of that, it absolutely can be a part of your day dot rhythm. And remember that ultimately when they're in utero, they have white noise. It's continuous noise that's going on inside here. So for them, it's that like they can hear your heart beating, they can hear your bowel sounds, they can hear digestion, like, you know, all the things. So for you to start that from the get-go is definitely not going to hurt, and it just becomes a sleep cue from very early on that you will then continue throughout their life, like until you're ready. It's also a very easy thing to get rid of because all you do is reduce the noise over a period of a week and it's gone. Like,
and is there a need to get rid of it? So obviously your boys are a little bit older now; they're still listening.
3 and 5.
If it was working, so there's
nearly 33, and I'm still using it. No,
so it's not like the dummy where there's a perfect time to get rid of it. If it works, it works. And if you decide one day you want to get rid of it, you can. That's no problem. You just turn it down.
If we didn't take it on holiday, like, I mean, it's easy to take anyway because you can have an app and you can turn it on your phone. So it's not like even if you're like, oh, no, we left the white noise machine at home, just download a free app. And, you know, so it's so easy to replicate. Like it's it's funny because when I get resistance about it, I'm like, I mean, it's fine. You don't need to use it, but it's actually one of the easiest things to both give and get rid of.
Yes.
And to not have to stress about, I didn't bring my white noise machine. Oh, I just turned my phone on. So, but it's also not like you don't have to use it. It's just a really great way of creating that, you know, sound that help prevent the wake-ins and the sleep cue and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and exactly right. With anything, it's an option.
Yeah.
It's an option that you can explore. And I find, especially when you've already got another child at home who makes a lot of noise while your baby is trying to go to sleep, it is very good at drowning out those sounds because they will scream or knock something over or something will happen, and the last thing you need is your little baby waking up because of that.
Exactly.
So I find that that's working really well the second time around because it just drowns out all the extra noises around the house. And sometimes I find myself putting my what's it called? Range hood?
The range hood, yeah.
Yeah, my fan.
Yeah.
In the kitchen. I'll put that on to help drown out noises if my toddler's asleep and I'm cooking.
Yeah.
Because I just find that, again, it just helps to reduce that sharp, clunky noise that you might hear. And I truly believe it helps their sleep. I want to tell you a quick story before we move on to the swaddling demo because I just still think it's so funny. So you know how you get a lot of unwanted advice from everyone? So when I had Mussy in hospital, I had a midwife who I'm sure meant so well. We took white noise to the hospital because we had read a lot of Harvey Karp's work. We downloaded his tracks, to be honest, the hairdryer, the rain, all the different tracks. And we decided that we were going to bring it to the hospital and start using it straight away. And this midwife came in the middle of the night to check on me and check on baby, and we were doing fine. I hadn't asked her to come. She was just doing a routine check. And she said, "Oh, what's that noise you've got playing?" And I said, "Oh, it's just white noise. You know, I've read up on it, and it's meant to be very settling for babies. And you know, we're going to use it to try and help Mussy sleep." And she said, "Oh, okay then, that's interesting. God, he's going to be so dependent on that. He'll probably walk down the aisle on his wedding day to white noise, won't he?"
Oh my goodness.
3-day-old. Again, fortunately, I'm very confident.
Exactly, that you can back yourself. Oh my goodness.
But I was like, you can see how someone would go, "Oh God, like they're going to be so hooked on white noise, they won't ever be able to wean themselves off it." I just thought it was the funniest thing I've ever
And that's exactly right. Little comments like that, if you don't actually back yourself, then these are the things that shatter your confidence. Absolutely.
100%. I still laugh about it. So anyone out there, I can assure you, my son does not sleep with white noise anymore purely because we needed to use the speaker for my daughter now.
Yeah.
So we stopped white noise with him. But I'm confident he will get married to a different song one day when he decides to walk down the aisle.
Oh my God, I love that.
Jen. Now, to finish off, you have been amazing. You have been so generous with your time to educate all the ladies on everything early parenting. I already feel so much calmer. I want to have a third baby and just practice all this.
I know, just do it all.
Can we look at your amazing swaddle technique on beautiful baby Nat so that we understand in those first few weeks to months how to wrap a baby? Because I know a lot of the problem is that they get out of the wrap really quickly, or that we get a bit, clumsy and we're not quite sure what to do. So show us your amazing swaddling technique, please.
Absolutely. I'm going to just move my tripod. I don't think my laptop's going to be able to get quite the range for this, but you can see that on there, can't you? Down there. Perfect. So what I'm going to demonstrate, this is actually called, don't mind my headphones just sticking out here, but this is actually called the angel wrap. This is ultimately the wrap that you can use. That's the hands to heart that we spoke about, that they adopt in utero naturally, and that ultimately the Ergo Cocoon will do until your baby becomes arms out. So to do it, you basically are just going to lie your swaddle out in an open square, but you're actually going to fold a little bit over at the top. It's only a small amount, and you'll see why I do it in a moment. So then our beautiful little baby Nat comes into place. And what we're doing is we're popping her neck at the top of where the swaddle ends. Now, what happens with this special little duvel wacky, I'm using that technical term, duvel whacking. This fold actually becomes what we pop Bub's hands under. So, obviously you're going to have a moving baby, but all you need to do at the start is just have their arm loosely under here, because the swaddling part comes when we actually move, this swaddle over. But the arms are under there and they're tucked under like that little hood. Then what happens is when we pull over this, keeping that bit taut, is you're actually going to pull it over, and little baby Nat, her arm comes across like this. We tuck in this under the body, and she's come out of here, but we'll tuck that under again. And the same thing applies. Keep that, tuck that up under her arm so it's coming around with you, and the other part comes around. So we always want it nice and tight around the body. So that is, I'm putting quite a lot of pressure on here. But it looks like she's in a straitjacket, but ultimately what's going on here is her hands are to her heart, but this will loosen a bit, and she actually is able to bring that fist up to her mouth. So that is literally, so she was in a bassinet right now. You've got it all tucked under, and sort of her body weight is what holds that material underneath. What happens down here is we keep this very, very loose. So all I'm going to do is actually fold it over. I'm not tucking this in tightly. I'm just sort of tucking it under. And this is from a hip dysplasia point of view, that you need to keep those legs free, because we don't want to restrict those hips. They need to be able to move freely so that we don't lead to developmental dysplasia of the hip. So that's basically the angel wrap. And look, if Nat was actually a moving baby, she could still move up like this and around, but her startle reflex is inhibited, and that's what the whole point of swaddling is, to keep them contained like that, so that she's not going to be startling herself awake, and she's all nice and contained but still has access to her hands. So I'm just going to move this up now, but that is ultimately what I did with the boys, is I would use the angel wrap within an Ergo Cocoon, so they had the benefit of being warm, but also the benefit of a nice tight swaddle. And then as they started to get older, I took them out of the angel wrap and they just became within the Ergo Cocoon. So they were still contained, but they had a bit more movement. And then eventually they went arms out of swaddle. So it was just this natural transition and evolvement.
So is that angel wrap the technique, or is that the actual wrap itself?
That's just the technique. So there's probably wraps, it's called the angel wrap. There's probably wraps out there that actually do that, that you can buy, but you don't, if you want to buy there's lots of products out there that can help you do all of these things. But at the end of the day, that was just done. The angel wrap is what it's called, and you can do that with a cheap Muslim wrap. You don't have to spend lots of money on all of this stuff.
Do you have any recommendations for what type of wrap, like muslin or flannelette, or...
I'd say if it's warmer, cooler months, go flannelette. If it's but this is, especially if you use that, technique of putting them in a sleeping bag still, the sleeping bag's what's going to give you your consistent warmth. So what you put underneath, you still might go a flannelette wrap over a cotton muslin, because that's that extra warmth layer. Depends what your room temperature is getting down to. But otherwise, just a cotton, breathe. Always keep to natural fibers, guys. That's my recommendation. Unnatural fibers don't breathe, and that can lead to overheating and hot babies. So keep it a breathable fabric like wool or bamboo or cotton. And the thickness of it just depends on how warm you think your baby needs to be. So, but you can't go wrong with a cotton muslin wrap.
And I found myself, the ones with a little bit of stretch in them, so much easier to wrap because they had that little bit of give.
This one, this one doesn't. And it just does feel better to have that elastin or whatever's within there to help,
Yeah, no, I agree. From personal experience, I found I always had so much more success if it had a bit of stretch in it. So thank you so much, Jen. You are an absolute wealth of knowledge, and I absolutely love you, as I've told you 100,000 times in this interview. I just think your knowledge is so needed, and I think the way you translate that knowledge to women is just so unique and so necessary for women to feel comfortable to seek out that advice and to seek out help and not to feel judged for it or shamed for it. So the biggest thank you for jumping on this podcast and helping to spread this knowledge and this education out to all the women. So for anyone, which I'm sure everyone will want to find you, how do we come and find you? Where are you living? Where can we find all of your goodies? Not where you're actually living.
So I hang out. Yeah. So my address is no, I won't give you that, guys. I hang out a lot on Instagram. I'm on Facebook as well, but I'm on Instagram more, although everything comes over to Facebook. So at Jen Butler is my Instagram handle. I have my own podcast as well, the Early Parenting Podcast, which I dive deep into all sorts of topics from birth through to 4 years of age. So it's, toddler behavior, it's sleep, it's breastfeeding, it's introducing food. I really try and sort of cover everything that happens to help support you in the first 4 years of life. So that's the Early Parenting Podcast. And my website, www.jenniferbutler.com.au. So they would be the top 3 places that you can hang out with me a little bit more.
Amazing. And I can vouch for your podcast. I have learned so much myself from it. They're all bite-sized episodes, so 10 to 15 minutes with like the top 3 tips that you can take away. So they're good for busy mums, or women who just don't have very much time, because you can just take what you need in such a short amount of time. And Jen has some wonderful courses and things coming up, so keep an eye on her because she's going to be releasing some new projects in the next coming months or weeks or
yes.
So keep an eye on that, guys. So definitely go and check her out. I'm sure she is in her DMs all the time, so go send her a message if you have any questions, or just tell her how much you liked the episode, what you learned about it. It will be great. So thank you so much for jumping on, Jen. It's been amazing to have you. And we might have to get you back for a toddler section one day, I think. We'll see how we go.
I would love to do that. And it's been absolutely lovely joining you. And I'm so glad to have been able to help. So thank you for having me.
I hope you loved this final bonus episode in the Newborn Life podcast series. Jen is such a wealth of knowledge, and you can connect with her at Jen Butler Early Parenting if you'd like to learn more. Have a wonderful day, and we will catch you soon for some more amazing podcast series coming up inside the Pregnancy Posse.